He confessed to having hit a girl with his car. Then, in panic, he and few others pushed her body inside the car. They sped to the far end of Snow Avenue near the freeway, a lonely, desolate stretch, and there, without hesitation, they laid her down and covered her with heavy stones. One of the chilling theories is on the disappearance of Deanie Marie Peters, which had haunted Detective Ken Klein Hexel's life for 34 continuous years, following him like a shadow, clinging to every nook and corner until his last breath. And now, nearly half a century later, the question lingers. Will the truth of Deanie Marie Peters ever come out? Or will her story be one cold, haunting mystery, reverberating across Michigan? Before we go further, do subscribe and press the notification bell to keep yourself updated about all the latest stories. The hum of the old fluorescent lights in Ken Klein Hexel's home office did little to dispel the profound quiet that had become his constant companion in the twilight of his life. Dust motes floated lazily in the single shaft of afternoon sunlight, dancing over stacks of meticulously organized case files, each one a testament to decades spent chasing shadows. His hand, weathered and marked from long nights and cold coffee, moved slowly across the page of his worn journal. He whispered to himself, "This case has followed me for 34 years. It clung to my badge like rust, then burrowed into my soul." It was 2015, just 3 years before his death, and the face of 14-year-old Deanie Marie Peters, forever young, frozen in faded photographs above his desk, still haunted his waking thoughts. Even after retiring from the Kent County Sheriff's Department in 1994, Klein Hexel refused to let go. Deanie Peters' disappearance was more than just a cold case. It was personal, a silent promise to a ghost. Doing private detective work became his excuse to keep hunting, an act of penance for a truth he had not yet found. Years had passed, blending into a long stream of unsolved puzzles and fleeting hopes. But the mystery of Deanie remained sharp, unyielding. Time and again, Klein Hexel's mind returned to Bruce Bunch, the volatile teenager tied by circumstance and dark rumors to Deanie's final days. So many testimonies, so many whispers, all pointing in Bruce's direction. The phantom accident, drunken confessions, the violent temper that seemed to follow him into adulthood. Was he a monster? An accidental killer? Or just another victim of circumstance? The weight of the uncertainty pressed heavily on Klein Hexel. Now in his mid-70s, and staring out at this muted Michigan landscape, the grim reality was undeniable. The Deanie Peters case would, in all likelihood, remain unsolved until his dying breath. And Bruce Bunch's true guilt might never be known. A shadow of suspicion doomed to follow him into the grave. His hand strayed toward the thick, dog-eared folder, familiar as his own reflection. He started leafing through the reports, witness statements, and desperate pleas. His mind wandered back to that cold February afternoon, the very beginning of an impossible void. It was February 5th, 1981. The weak afternoon sun fought to warm the brick facade of Forest Hills Central Middle School in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Inside, muffled grunts and shouts from the gym's wrestling practice provided a stark, almost primal counterpoint to the quiet descending over the rural evening. Dust motes whirled in the fluorescent glow, oblivious to the subtle shift in the air, the imperceptible ripple of fate about to overtake an ordinary Thursday. Amidst the din sat 14-year-old Deanie Marie Peters, a spirited eighth grader with a feisty glint in her brown eyes, flanked by her mother, Mary, and a family friend. They had come to root for Deanie's 6-year-old brother, who was a miniature figure wrestling on the mats, oblivious to the silent shadow spreading across the gym. Somewhere around 5 p.m., a restless energy. Something stirred in Deanie. She got up from the hard gym seat, her attention drifting away from the practice. She gave a casual wave and said quickly, unconcernedly, "I'll be right back," turning toward the cafeteria exit. Ard Dean Herbert, a close family friend, watched her go, assuming the most ordinary explanation. a quick trip to the bathroom. But minutes stretched to 15 to 20 to 30. With each tick of the clock, it seemed, the knot of unease tightened in their stomachs. Mary Peters, her maternal instincts flaring, had started asking questions. Arid's casual assumptions dissolved into alarm. Deanie had not returned. The first checks were rushed, almost frantic. Nothing in the bathrooms, nothing in the cafeteria, now empty and deserted. Back to the gym, Deanie was gone. Outside, early February, twilight was deepening. Muted shades of gray and blue colored the snow-dusted grounds. But of Deanie's bright, youthful form, nothing. The ordinary afternoon had curdled into an impossible mystery. A profound, chilling silence began to settle over the school hallways. Mary Peters was in a panic, her heart racing with some sort of primal fear, looking everywhere for someone to help. In the hysteria of those hours, the same creeping dread locked its grip on Ken Klein Hexel. A seasoned Kent County detective with over a decade in police work, Klein Hexel knew the rhythm, the surreal, ritualistic quiet that follows when a child goes missing. Stepping into the chasm left by Deanie, Klein Hexel found himself grappling with the paradox. A witness interviewed in those early hours provided a tantalizing yet frustratingly mundane last glimpse of her. Deanie had been seen by the back door of the school, walking casually alongside an older girl, perhaps 15 to 18 years old. They were talking, not arguing. There was no disturbance, no cry for help. Just two young women lost in conversation, stepping into the fading light. And yet, the very ordinariness of this vision made things all the more mysterious. For what kind of person so apparently alive 1 minute could disappear in an instant the next? Some described Deanie as spirited, sometimes a little rebellious, a free spirit testing boundaries. She smoked cigarettes. Some had speculated she might have slipped outside for a quick smoke. She occasionally stayed at friends' houses without permission. These small rebellions painted a picture of the typical teenager, but created a subtle, misleading narrative. Some early theories leaned toward the comforting explanation of a willful departure, but Deanie's life was far more complicated than teenage defiance. Just 2 days before she vanished, simmering tensions boiled over. A physical altercation had taken place outside of school, between Deanie and 2 or 3 other girls, over a boy named Larry, whom everyone called Guy, Deanie's boyfriend at the time. Threats had been exchanged. Explicit warnings told her to stay away. One of the girls involved was Guy's own sister. The incident was significant enough that school officials documented it. But crucially, this information never reached Detective Klein Hexel during the early days of the investigation. It's an oversight that would cast a long shadow over the initial search for Deanie. Her home life was complicated too. Her father, Dwayne Peters, lived in California, far from their quiet Michigan town. Friends remembered Deanie speaking about running away to see him, a desperate yearning for connection, or maybe an escape from mounting pressures at home. She had lived in California as a young child, back when her parents were still together. Initial reports said her relationship with her stepfather was strained, a classic generational clash. A teenager wanting some measure of independence, pushing boundaries, and a stepfather with old-fashioned expectations of respect. Such familiar discord, so common in houses throughout the teenage years, only added layers to the puzzle of Deanie Peters' disappearance. But Detective Klein Hexel knew that the idea of Deanie running away was a common enough theory, adding a plausible yet ultimately misleading layer to the investigation. The cold, hard facts in Deanie's quiet bedroom told quite another story. It was in her daughter's room, her heart heavy with dread, that Mary Peters found several $100s of untouched Christmas money. Deanie's full wardrobe, her jewelry, wallet, and purse. Nothing was packed. Nothing prepared for a journey. The scene didn't speak of a planned departure. It spoke of a life abruptly paused. Most importantly, she found Deanie's diary, a very personal chronicle of a teenager's inner world, and immediately turned it over to the police. This intimate journal, filled with her deepest thoughts and daily observations, would become a key piece of the puzzle. Despite wide-ranging efforts to contact authorities in California and reach her father, no evidence ever came to light that Deanie had ever arrived there. Her father, a man weighed down by distance and concern, confirmed that she had never mentioned any plan to come see him. The last letter he received from Deanie, written just weeks before she vanished, was a heart-wrenching snapshot of a life full of youthful hope. In her neat, careful handwriting, she expressed affection, pride at school, and her longing to connect. "Dear Daddy, I miss you so. I just wish I could see you. I still haven't gotten your present, but maybe by the time you get this letter, I will. Oh, Daddy, you're going to be so proud of me when I tell you how I'm doing in school. I got 2 B's and 1 A+ on my math test, then 2 B's and 1 A on my science test. I have a big picture of me for you this year. I hope you like it." "Well, Dad, how was your New Year? How was your Christmas?" "Mine was okay, I guess, but it brought back a lot of memories of you and my brothers and sisters. Well, almost the whole school knows about you and how great you are. My boyfriend wants to meet you. His name is Larry, but everybody calls him Guy. Well, Daddy, let's start keeping in touch better. I miss you so much. I just wish I could see you. Love, your daughter, Deanie. P.S. Take care of yourself. Miss you." The letter, as a snapshot preserved of her spirit, revealed a girl doing well in school, proud of her B's and A+, missing Daddy, mentioning her boyfriend Larry, and eager to stay in touch. Yet nowhere in those lines was there even a single hint of running away. This was an intimate window into the heart of Deanie, one that further galvanized investigators and her family into the belief that this was no teenage rebellion. Something darker had occurred, something sinister. The early runaway theory that had consumed precious time and investigation began to crumble, replaced by the chilling certainty that Deanie did not leave of her own accord. As the snows of February gave way to the reluctant thaw of March, the focus of suspicion began to shift. A new figure emerged from the periphery of the investigation, someone who had been in the very walls from which Deanie had vanished. Arthur Daz, the 40-year-old janitor at Forest Hills Central Middle School, was known to students as Mr. Art. He'd been working that afternoon, he said, cleaning the office around 5 p.m., and hadn't seen Deanie that day. But he knew who she was, a sharp, happy-go-lucky kid, good-looking and well-liked. In the immediate chaos following her disappearance, he even joined Mary Peters in the frantic, fruitless search for her daughter, a seemingly kind, concerned helper. But once the leads dried up, investigators naturally turned their attention to those with unrestricted access to the building. Arthur Daz, who knew many of the hidden corners and utility areas of the school, attracted attention. The school also had a gas-fired incinerator, routinely used to burn. The school's incinerator, used to burn papers and food scraps, became the focal point of the most horrifying question. Had Arthur or someone else with access used it to dispose of Deanie's body? Investigators checked it thoroughly, searching for even the slightest trace, but the evidence simply wasn't there. In fact, something important was learned. The incinerator wasn't even hot enough to fully burn books or paper, let alone a human body. As terrifying as that idea was, it simply wasn't possible. And with that, another lead crumbled away. About a week after Deanie vanished, Mary and her husband visited Mr. Art at the school, perhaps hoping for comfort, or maybe one more overlooked detail. He expressed genuine sorrow for what had happened, and then shared something that he believed might be important. On the very night Deanie vanished, he said he heard banging on one of the school's locked doors during the wrestling event. When he looked, 3 high school-aged boys were standing outside. One was wearing a green and white Forest Hills Central jacket. Mr. Art didn't recognize any of them and didn't let them in. He told Mary that he had already shared this with detectives, but added something unsettling. No one had ever asked him for descriptions of the boys, nor shown him a photo lineup. In the fog of those early hours, filled with panic and missed chances, this detail hinted at a path that might never have been explored. Then, about a month after Deanie went missing, things took a dramatic turn. Police arrived at the school and arrested Mr. Art. He spent a night in jail, an unnerving, disorienting experience, made worse by his cellmate, who just happened to be a man owing detectives a favor. It didn't take long for Mr. Art to suspect the man was an undercover cop fishing for a confession. But with nothing to confess, he stayed silent. The following day, he was taken in front of a grand jury. Rumors flew that he had kidnapped Deanie, that he had sold her, that she'd been taken to Chicago or even Nevada. He remembered thinking, "You people are nuts. I've been here the whole time." He hired an attorney an expensive $600 fee, especially for a janitor. Police executed a search warrant and went through every inch of his property while he watched, stunned, as his private life was turned inside out. And yet, after all the disruption and suspicion, nothing tied him to Deanie's disappearance. As the investigation began to falter, the cloud over Mr. Art slowly drifted away. That's when a new and far more volatile figure stepped into the center of suspicion. Bruce Bunch. Bruce was a 17-year-old junior at Forest Hills Central High School at the time of Deanie's disappearance, and fate had wound him tightly into the days leading up to that disappearance. He was reportedly dating one of the girls involved in the fight with Deanie just 2 days earlier. The rumors that started circulating around town and eventually reached the police were shockingly dark. It was said to be something like this. Bruce had been in the middle school parking lot the night Deanie disappeared. Perhaps he saw her step outside for a quick cigarette, a little act of teenage defiance on a snowy evening. And perhaps, being a teenager himself, he decided to scare her a little with his car. But as he drove toward her, his car supposedly hit a patch of ice. Control was lost. And the unthinkable happened. He struck her, killed her. Panicked, he dragged or threw her body into nearby bushes. Later that night, under the cover of darkness, he returned to take her away and bury her in some secret, silent place. And then came Bruce's own unsettling behavior. He told people he had dreamed about Deanie. Not just ordinary dreams, vivid nightmares. "I used to have this mental telepathy thing," he once told a friend. "I could tell things, like when a bird flies into your house and tells you someone's going to die." It was a disturbing superstition that a bird entering a home foretells death, especially for a woman, and it added yet another eerie layer to an already unnerving story. Bruce's already troubled persona painted him as a young man deeply entangled in the shadows of premonition and guilt. Whispers and his own strange admissions were enough that Klein Hexel brought the 17-year-old in for questioning. The detective, who was used to investigating even the darkest recesses of the human mind, bombarded Bruce with questions about the rumors, the accident theory, and those macabre dreams. Bruce, however, seemed to keep his cool, advancing a solid alibi for the night Deanie disappeared. He maintained that the tales that involved him in her death were completely invented. Gossip, nothing more. Derived from his unsavory history. Klein Hexel sensed an undercurrent of something deeply disturbing, but could find no tangible evidence to contradict Bruce's account. He knew that without Deanie's body, Bruce couldn't be formally charged or even officially named a primary suspect. It was the familiar, impenetrable wall that rose so often in cold cases, a stark reminder that suspicion alone, no matter how compelling, is not justice. As the years blurred into a relentless stream, Deanie's name refused to fade. Her mother, Mary Peters, waged her own tireless campaign against the encroaching silence. She organized vigils, her voice raw, unwavering each time a local news channel would listen, while her hands distributed flyers bearing Deanie's youthful smile, trying to stir memories in the community that seemed to move on, keep the spotlight on the void her daughter had left. Every birthday, every holiday, the Peters family issued fresh appeals, desperate attempts at rousing someone, anyone, to yield that single piece of information which could break the decades-long case. Klein Hexel grasped the profound necessity of her crusade, a mother's fierce refusal to accept the unacceptable, an emotional counterpoint to the official stillness that often settled over unsolved mysteries. The passing seasons brought no answers, only the slow, inexorable march of time. Schoolyards changed, Memories faded. The initial shock dulled to an ache that lasted for many. Yet in Klein Hexel's mind, the file on Deanie Peters never truly closed. Then, in 1989, came a chilling whisper from the most unlikely of places, the waters of the Flat River, stirring the long-dormant investigation into fresh, desperate activity. A woman out enjoying a day of canoeing talked about a disturbing conversation. A man in her canoe, whom she would later name to police, said he and two others had struck a girl named Deanie with a car in a school parking lot. Panicked, they had thrown her body into the trunk. One of the three was not identified as Bruce Bunch. One man was named Joseph Falstrom. Detectives in the early 1990s took him in for questioning. "We heard you and your brother ran her down at a party," the police pressed. Falstrom denied any involvement. He said the canoe story was entirely fabricated, and he had never even canoed that stretch of river. Instead, he turned the tables, telling a story that involved Bruce Bunch, not him. As Joseph would later recall, during one raucous kegger, a drunken, sobbing Bruce repeatedly screamed the haunting words, "I killed her! I killed Deanie Peters!" According to Joseph, Bruce described where he had buried her on a property about 5 miles north of Lowell, near an old one-room schoolhouse where many children, including Bruce, had attended class. He spoke of being haunted by the chains clinging to the maypole behind the schoolhouse, on which he said he had buried her. Joseph gave a colorful description of Bruce's anguished conscience. This testimony was later judged to be unreliable, and no charges were ever pressed. For Ken Klein Hexel, though, the pursuit of Deanie's truth never truly ended. Though he retired from the Kent County Sheriff's Department in 1994, it remained an ember in his mind, fueling private investigations and keeping a promise to a ghost. Through the intervening years, Detective Ken Klein Hexel remained a solitary torchbearer against the growing darkness of an unsolved crime, holding on to every frayed thread of hope. He would often revisit the past, searching for answers that might finally give him a resolution in the future. Years went by, yet the questions unsettled like echoes in an empty room. Constant, haunting, impossible to be tuned out. In 2008, hope flared with the creation of the Kent County Metro Cold Case Team, composed of detectives from Michigan State Police, Grand Rapids, and Kent County. Funded by a substantial $300,000 grant, one of their first actions was to revisit old leads, including Joseph Falstrom. This time, Joseph agreed to take a polygraph test. The results confirmed his innocence, solidifying his alibi. He also provided investigators with a United States Army document proving he was training at Fort Benning, Georgia, at the exact time Deanie went missing. With that, police officially cleared Joseph Falstrom from the list of suspects. How it had taken so many years for such a definitive alibi to surface remained a frustrating loose end, a lingering question in the early investigation. The reinvestigation put the tumultuous life of Bruce Bunch in middle age into focus. It was reported that he moved to Kentucky, where he opened an auto repair shop, but his past did not let him go. His first wife, Beth Harmon, painted a stark picture of a violent, abusive relationship. She described heavy drinking and terrifying blackouts, during which Bruce would wake with no memory of what he had done. She even described the incident where he pushed her out of a moving vehicle, which left her with a broken ankle. Although no criminal charges were filed in Michigan or Kentucky, official documents revealed that Beth had filed for a domestic violence protection order in 1994, describing Bruce as loud, forceful, and threatening to both her and himself. Bruce's daughter, Janelle, remembered her father's acquaintance with Deanie. "Yeah, he'd met her," she said, allowing that he drank heavily and could be unpleasant when drunk. "He was a very lovable guy," she said, even though at times he could be harsh. It was his mouth that got him in trouble. Even so, she said her father never mentioned Deanie. That is, not until a retired detective called their home, searching for him. Only then did Bruce tell his daughter there was a missing girl, that her body was gone and that authorities thought he might know something because he'd met her. Whereupon Janelle asked outright, seeking the truth, "Dad, did you have something to do with it?" She remembered his forceful, emphatic denial, a final, unwavering rejection of the accusations which for decades had haunted him. On February 1st, 2008, Bruce Bunch died of a heart attack at age 44, still proclaiming his innocence and taking whatever secrets he may have held to the grave. For Detective Klein Hexel, the cold facts of Bruce's life and his sudden death became just another file in the thick folder he had carried for decades. He had chased Bruce through every rumor, every lead, watching the truth slip through his fingers time and again. Klein saw Bruce as a troubled, violent man, capable of terrible acts, but he never found the irrefutable proof that could bring Deanie justice. These renewed efforts entailed revisiting the physical locations tied to the canoe story and Bruce's alleged confession. A little more than a year later, on May 12, 2009, police and experts were gathered at the old schoolhouse itself. The Kent County Sheriff's Office had a mechanical excavator skim topsoil in areas suspected of concealing Deanie's body, while Michigan State University's Department of Anthropology examined the disturbed earth for irregularities. Yet again, advanced techniques and renewed hope saw authorities find nothing of significance. The silent ground continued to guard its secrets, as the official cold case team did its work of retreading the steps that Klein Hexel had walked decades ago. For Detective Klein Hexel, the years that transpired until 2010 contained mixed feelings of hope and frustration. He realized the limitations brought about by the first investigation, leads that went cold, questions haunting him into retirement. While the cold case team chased their leads, Klein Hexel, ever the lonely torchbearer, continued his own independent search. He continued poring over dusty files, re-interviewing old contacts, and following dormant whispers, driven by the same unwavering promise he had made to Deanie's memory so long ago. It was this relentless dedication that, in 2010, led him down a new path. This path would end with a chilling discovery. A woman who lived in Lowell at the time of Deanie's disappearance came forward with a story she'd never fully told. Her account echoed those long-standing rumors surrounding Bruce Bunch. She related a disturbing night when a group came to her house, and among them was Bruce Bunch. She recalled how he was restless and acted strangely, but above all, what he said was most disturbing. Bruce is purported to have stated that he had struck a girl with his car, and she died. In a state of panic, he and some others had placed her body into a vehicle. He never gave any indication as to exactly who the others were. The woman reported that Bruce said they went to the end of Snow Avenue near the freeway, where there was a pile of rocks, and placed the body on the ground and covered it with large stones. Considering this grim story, Klein Hexel posited that the body, if the story were true, had probably been relocated by Bruce after spring thaws to another, perhaps permanent location. The truth here was buried twice. Back in the present, Klein Hexel leaned back in his worn office chair, the weight of the decades pressing down. The files before him were testament to years of effort, shifting faces of suspicion, taunting leads, and impenetrable walls. Deanie Peters' case remained open, a persistent ache, a haunting reminder that despite his relentless pursuit, the final answers still eluded him. The profound silence of his office echoed the emptiness which had swallowed her whole. Time would claim even the detective himself. In 2018, Ken Klein Hexel, the first officer assigned to Deanie's case, the man who refused to let her be forgotten, died at 77. He had been her most ardent advocate for 37 years, never giving up the search, never relinquishing belief, and yet the final pieces of Deanie's puzzle remained maddeningly out of reach. To the end of his days, he took her story with him to his grave, an unfulfilled vow. Like a seed lying in wait, the case of Deanie Peters would sprout new and bewildering life, even after the man who had guarded it for so long was gone. On July 2nd, 2021, Deputy Dan Bishop came to the building where Frisbee Sign Company was located in Ada, Michigan, belonging to 61-year-old James Frisbee. Frisbee was charged with one count of assaulting, resisting, and obstructing a police officer. But the charge that really sent shockwaves through the cold case investigation was perjury, and it related directly to Deanie Peters' disappearance. The probable cause affidavit laid out the allegations starkly. James Frisby had made false statements under oath, pursuant to a subpoena issued to investigate a cold case homicide. He also made false statements to law enforcement and others regarding possible suspects or witnesses. More damning, he had actively obstructed justice, instructing witnesses not to bring their phones to scheduled investigative subpoenas. An instruction at least 2 witnesses followed. The implication was clear. Frisby was working to impede the investigation, and his testimony was deeply suspect. During an August 2021 preliminary hearing in Grand Rapids, prosecutors played a tape of a 2008 interview with Frisby, who implicated 2 men as possible killers of Deanie, including one named Kyle Fate, who'd once worked at Frisby's sign shop. Kyle Fate had been friends with James Frisby, and at least one witness testified that Kyle had been Deanie's boyfriend around the time she went missing. Kyle himself had died in 2008 of an accidental overdose, taking whatever secrets he might have had with him. Susan Timmer, who had dated Kyle from 1999 to 2004, testified that James had phoned her the day Kyle died, chillingly suggesting that Kyle lived his life with drugs and alcohol because he felt guilty about killing Deanie Peters. Todd Parks, a mutual friend of James and Kyle, added that back in 2009, James had confided his theory that Kyle was the killer and that Deanie was buried somewhere near 68th Street and McCord Avenue in Alto. Kyle's ex-wife, Karen Canavo, confirmed the relationship by testifying that she once came upon a large picture of Deanie among Kyle's old photographs. On the back was an elaborate love letter, written to Kyle and signed by Deanie. The revelation had suggested that Deanie's romantic involvements were deeper than had been appreciated, and now James Frisby was placing a dead man squarely in the frame. Police detectives later testified that James told them he never made those accusations, which was a prime reason for his perjury charge. In September 2021, Judge David J. Botter ruled there was enough evidence to send the case of James Frisby to circuit court for a jury trial, where he could face the prospect of life in prison if convicted. The wheels of justice, however, turned slow. James Frisby's case has remained mired in court, never being tried or convicted related to the disappearance of Deanie Peters. 44 years have stretched into a lifetime since Deanie Marie Peters vanished into a cold Michigan evening. Forest Hills Central Middle School, once alive with youthful energy, then with frantic despair, has carried on its rhythms. But the memory of Deanie, the spirited brunette with big plans, remains an open wound for her family and a haunting enigma to investigators. From the early blunders and lost diary to the shifting sands of suspicion, from the quiet janitor to the volatile teenager, to the seemingly calculating businessman. Each turn of the investigation promised answers, only to deliver more questions. Her mother, Mary Peters, has lived through decades of agonizing uncertainty, a maternal anguish that time cannot truly lighten. The wave, casual words, "I'll be right back," echoes in her mind as a cruel mantra of what was lost. Detective Ken Klein Hexel was a man whose career and retirement were haunted by Deanie's case, and he dedicated untold hours to finding her. His legacy remains one of tireless effort in an unsolved investigation. Scientific breakthroughs that solved other cold cases like those of Christina Castiglione and Kimberly Lewisell have so far failed to give any answers here. Deanie's body was never found. Her final resting place has remained a cruel mystery. The precise events of that February evening, the actual perpetrator, the motive for such a callous act, remained buried deep within Michigan's past. The case of Deanie Peters remains one of the stark, lasting testaments to the fact that shadows seem to obstinately persist, refusing to yield even under the brightest light of human endeavors and progressive technology. It is a story of a young life abruptly extinguished, a family forever fractured, and a community left to grapple with the unsettling reality that some secrets, no matter how relentlessly pursued, continue to guard their truth in an unbroken, deafening silence. Thank you for being here and listening. Don't forget to hit the bell for our latest stories. Stay safe and take care of your loved ones.